Number 6 meeting of the Commission on Race and Access to Opportunity. This is the final meeting of the 2023 interim. I would like to go ahead and remind everyone to silence your cell phones. Lead staff is Brandon White, and the committee assistant is Brett Gillespie. Thank you all for your service throughout this interim. Brett, could you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Senator Berg, Senator Neal, Senator Westerfield, Representative Brown,
Here.
Representative Heverin, Representative Kulkarni, Ms. Baird, Mr. Coleman, Mr. Davis, Ms. Drake, Dr. Jones, Co-Chair Givens,
Present.
Co-Chair Timoney.
Present. All right, we are going to jump right into this. I want to go ahead and remind citizen members that you are fully participating members of this commission. If you have any questions during the meeting, simply notify or signal staff. The commission purpose statement is in your folders. The purpose of the commission shall be to conduct studies and research on issues where disparities may exist across the sectors of educational equity, child welfare, health, economic opportunity, juvenile justice, criminal justice, and any other sectors that are deemed relevant in an effort to identify areas of improvement in providing services and opportunities for minority communities. We have an excellent topic today. It's one that I know I feel pretty passionate about, and we have some experts in the field today that will be able to testify, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them. I will say that this, the good Lord has a way of providing signs throughout our lives to help us along with things. And this was something that I had, as a teacher, I had students that would bring this topic forward pretty frequently. And it wasn't until, it was last winter that I attended a basketball game at Woodford County High School. And one of the members in the audience was there that day because her son played on the basketball team with my son. And I walked up and I said, "Good morning to everybody." And then she said, "What are we going to do about Article 25 of the Kentucky Constitution?" And I knew what Article 25 of the Kentucky Constitution was because it dealt with slavery and indentured servitude. And it was at that moment I said, "Wait a minute." For me, that was the sign. So from that point forward, I know I made it a personal agenda item to continue to research and to continue to look at this more fully. I know Mr. White and I had conversations about it during last session and even last summer. So I'm pretty excited about this today. I'm pretty excited about hearing some of the history behind Kentucky and understanding the climate that existed during the time period in 1891 when Section 25 of the Kentucky Constitution was ratified. And we're gonna get some youthful perspective on the topic also. We've got some excellent presenters here today, and I'm looking forward to learning and continuing some discussions about this. So let's go ahead and start with bringing Dr. Childs, Cynthia Fox, and Raymond Sexton up to testify. All right, thank you all for being here. And if you wouldn't mind going across the table, introducing yourselves, and say what realm you're here for.
Okay. My name is Dr. David Childs. I'm a professor of social studies education, history, and Black studies at Northern Kentucky University. I also direct the Black Studies program at Northern Kentucky University, and also a member of the Faculty Senate at Northern Kentucky University. and I'm going to give some background on what you talked about. So looking forward to do that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Raymond Sexton. I'm the Executive Director of the Lexington Human Rights Commission, Lexington, Kentucky. Our office is the local enforcement agency of Fayette County that investigates discrimination complaints in employment, housing, and public accommodation, in addition to intergroup and interpersonal relations.
My name is Cynthia Fox. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, and we are the sole state agency that enforces the Kentucky Civil Rights Act. We also take complaints of discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. We also enforce federal civil rights acts.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Dr. Childs, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Thank you so much. We're going to talk about, let me set my timer. We're going to talk about the historical context of Section 25 of the Kentucky Constitution in its current state. And as was read previously, Kentucky Constitution, Section 25 says slavery and involuntary servitude in this state are forbidden except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So that's what the language says. The thesis of my brief talk: convict leasing laws prevalent after the American Civil War were designed for corporations to profit from prisoners and, most importantly, keep blacks enslaved after 1865. The language of Section 25 of the Kentucky Constitution permitting slavery in the case of prisoners was drawn directly from the 13th Amendment or influenced by the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It's the same language. These laws made convict leasing legal. And the 13th Amendment, you can see it parallels the language. This is the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, whereof shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. These are dates of the Civil War. You've seen this information before. 1861 to 1865, I included an image of African-American soldiers there from the Company E, 4th U.S. Colored Infantry. This is from the Library of Congress, 1864. U.S. Civil War purported to be over states' rights, but it was primarily over states' rights to own slaves, also known by the South as the War of Northern Aggression. They saw it as an infringement upon their rights. This image here is interesting. After 1863, U.S. colored troops were allowed to enter into the war. This is the only known photograph of an African-American Union soldier with his family. So the Reconstruction era came directly after 1865. This is an interesting image from 1867. From a scene in Washington, June 3rd, 1867. So we're going to talk a little bit about Reconstruction as it relates to the matter at hand. The Reconstruction era was a period in American history which lasted from late in the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, until the Compromise of 1877. Its main goals, Reconstruction, that is to rebuild the nation after the war, reintegrate the former Confederate states, and address the social, political, and economic impacts of slavery. That was the aim of Reconstruction. After the end of the Civil War, Southern legislatures were ruled by majority coalitions of African Americans and radical Republicans and Union generals acting as military governors. Reconstruction had significant shortcomings, including the failure to protect free blacks from Klan violence before 1871, as well as issues of corruption, starvation, disease, death, and brutal treatment of Union soldiers. Moreover, it offered reparations to former slave owners, but not reparations to former slaves. And so then we go to the Nadir period. So first you saw the dates of the Civil War, then Reconstruction, and right after Reconstruction was the Nadir of American race relations. Those dates go from 1877 to the 1900s. Actually, FDR was, I'm going to talk about convict leasing a little bit later, which FDR eventually brought an end to that. But the Nadir period, 1877 to 1900s, was racial violence against the black community, a period of time of racial violence against the black community. This particular image is interesting. This is in Dayton, Ohio, actually. Springfield, Ohio, 1923. You see Klansmen. You can see their faces, and they had a band. They were marching through the streets of Dayton, Ohio, playing music. This would have been around during the Nadir period of racial violence. A little bit more here. The Nadir of American racial relations was a period in African American history and the history of the U.S. from the end of Reconstruction in 1877 through early 20th century, when racism in the U.S., especially anti-black racism, was more open and pronounced than it had ever been during any other period in the nation's history. During this period, African Americans lost access to many civil rights which they had gained during Reconstruction. Anti-black violence, lynching, segregation, legalized racial discrimination, the expression of white supremacy all increased during the Nadir period. And the Nadir period is that one of those periods in history that most people perhaps may not have heard about. Then we get to convict leasing, which is part of the matter at hand. Convict leasing took place from 1840s to 1900s. You can see an image of convicts, African Americans, former slaves working in Florida in 1915 there in the image. Convict leasing specifically was a practice that was linked to indentured servanthood. Convict leasing in the U.S. was widespread in the South during the Reconstruction period. Farmers and businessmen needed to find replacements, here's the key point here, for the labor force once their slaves had been freed. Some Southern legislatures passed black codes to restrict free movement of black people and force them into employment. For instance, several states made it illegal for a black man to change jobs without the approval of his employer. If convicted of vagrancy, black people could be imprisoned. They also received sentences for a variety of petty offenses. So once they were in prison, according to the law, which is still on the books in Kentucky, they could be legally enslaved. So you have a situation where these individuals were being incarcerated for minor offenses. Now they were able to be legally enslaved. States began to lease convict labor to the plantations and other facilities seeking labor, as the freedmen were trying to withdraw and work for themselves at the same time. This provided states with a new source of revenue, and states and organizations made unprecedented amounts of money through the convict leasing. It provided, as I said, a new source of revenue during those years when their finances were largely depleted, and lessees profited by the use of forced labor at less than market rates. The criminal justice system colluded with private planters and other business owners to entrap, convict, and lease black people as prison laborers. The legal basis was rooted in the exception language in the U.S. state constitutions, the U.S. and state constitutions, in regard to involuntary servitude. And this is an image from 1895 of convicts being made to work under gunpoint, and they took a pause to take a picture here. This is from 1895. Another image here, I think this is interesting. Convicts leased to do agricultural work. This is from the late 1800s. Much like the work they would have done on an antebellum plantation. I'm going to show you some books in a minute where I draw some sources for further reading that's related to that. In 1892, some people fought back, and there were campaigns against this. People recognized what was going on even back then. In 1892's Tennessee campaign at condemning prison labor. It says, Tennessee shame convicts in the Cold Creek mines. And vote for Turney for governor and Welker for Congress if you wish this to continue. So it's one of those political advertisements They worked in Cold Creek mines. This is what this is referring to. You see the convicts working in coal mines, primarily were black males. Here's another image. I think this is very insightful. Comparing convict leasing to enslavement, they have drawn an auction block, and they have the convict there. And he said, the title says, "What do you give?" Atlanta, Georgia newspaper. This is from 1908. So let me scroll back up. You can see the image there. Slavery in state constitutions. These are states that have recently amended their language. It said virtually the same thing that ours says in Kentucky. Colorado, theirs was amended in 2018 to take the language out of enslavement. Nebraska, 2020. Utah, 2020. Tennessee, 2020. Alabama, 2022. Tennessee was 2022. Alabama was 2022. Same with Oregon and Vermont that have recently amended their constitutions. These are some texts I referred to. This is probably one of the most pivotal texts that I drew this information from. It's Slavery by Another Name. This was a Pulitzer Prize-winning book. If you want to get a background, an intensive background, this is a great text. It's by Blackman, Douglas A. Blackman. The full title is Slavery by Another Name, the Re-Enslavement of Black Americans from the Civil War to World War II. So this carries all the way up to the 20th century when FDR made it illegal. Another pivotal text is by the renowned historian Eric Foner. His text is Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. One of the projects that the Underground Railroad Freedom Center is working on, even currently now, just at a meeting, is to bring more awareness of Reconstruction and what happened. A lot of people know about the Civil War, but they don't know about Reconstruction, and people certainly don't know about the Nadir period, where a lot of those rights were taken away. And this is some of my own writing where I've been working on some of these ideas. This is a project out of Democracy and Me, is our local NPR station. I do some writing for them, exploring historic black codes, combating prejudice with social studies teaching. So this is my way to work with K-12 teachers and bring some of this history into the classroom. And then same thing, this is Escaping from Home. I drew a lot of information from my own writing, my own research. This is actually a novel I wrote for middle school, high school classrooms, and undergraduate classrooms that deal with enslavement, freedom, this whole idea, concessions being made, rights being taken away. And one of the classic works on enslavement, From Slavery to Freedom by John Hope Franklin, From Slavery to Freedom, A History of African Americans, and Evelyn Higginbotham. That's a text you want to check out. Teaching the Causes of the American Civil War, 1850 to 1861, just showing you my sources here. Edited by Michael E. Capron. This is a project I was a part of as well. Let me show you that title again. And as I close, these are just another look at the references here. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. That was very insightful. I do have one quick question. Because obviously in the states that you'd listed where this is, it definitely has some momentum. 2022 was a big year for changing constitutions, and I'm hoping we can continue that here in Kentucky. In one state, in Louisiana, it failed, and it was the indentured servitude portion. And there were a lot of people who they were trying to take convict leasing, the concept of convict leasing, when this was ratified, and putting it to today, in today's standards.
Yes.
In your opinion, if a prison starts a reward type scenario where inmates are allowed to be rehabilitated by earning skills or certifications and applying those so that when they exit, they do have job skills, do you equate that to the same as convict leasing?
Well, I'm going to answer the question in a way that may not answer your question directly, but I think gets at what we're talking about, and then I can come back around to it. there's convict leasing going on in the way. Many companies like Victoria's Secret, you can name a number of companies that benefit from prison labor, especially the private prison industry, where they pay the convicts so little, a few dollars a day, sometimes a few cents a day. And there are organizations that are making unprecedented amounts of money based on prison labor. And so it's going on, a form of it is going on as we speak. If you begin to, the audience can do a simple Google of all of the organizations. Walmart used to be one, but I think they've got so much flack about it. All the organizations that benefit from prison labor, cheap prison labor, they pay the prisoners so little. So that's what it looks like today. In terms of your question, a program that you're asking, a program that benefits, where they can train and have a skill when they are no longer incarcerated. That sounds like a good thing. I don't know the details of that. Any opportunity where inmates can learn something that's going to be profitable to them will be beneficial. I grew up in an inner city community where our town was decimated by the three strikes and you're out laws and not having due process and plea bargains. I mean, 30% of my community, the young men were incarcerated for 10, 15, 20 years, and they certainly learned nothing that was profitable when they came out. They didn't have many skills. So any project that's going to be meaningful and not sort of benefit the profiteers, having the prisoners in mind would be good. Did I answer your question? Yes.
Yes, sir, you did. The difference that we're looking for, and what I think a lot of people are when they're understanding this issue, is the concept of forced labor versus in some opportunities inmates are given the choice to do these types of things, and I think that's a big determinant. Because I think that's one of the things that we're looking forward as far as kind of setting a standard. Like, this is kind of what we're talking about. Because I do see a lot of value in a lot of the prison systems where they're bringing in simulators where inmates are allowed to work on getting their CDL and those types of things where they leave and they have something to hold on to and to prevent. That I can never say the word recidivism.
Yeah, recidivism. Yes.
All right, I did a whole lot better there than I thought in my mind. Anything that we can do in that regard, because the research shows that's the way out. That's the way to break the cycle.
Well, it's called rehabilitation. And that's the idea. Supposedly that's the idea. One of my major concerns is for-profit prisons, where individuals are becoming multimillionaires based on prison labor, and they benefit financially from the more prisoners they have in their organization, and majority of them are African American males, slavery by another name.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Raymond, if you'd like to.
Sure. And before I get to my remarks, I think to kind of answer your question, the previous question is to look. I believe Vermont, they kind of dealt with this issue, and they kind of did an exception to the exception clause, where they still took out the slavery language, but they specifically addressed it in the law by saying nothing in this chapter will, and they addressed the prison issue. So I think look to that as a model if that's kind of one of the hangups that we're getting with the prison. Right. So good afternoon, co-chairs Givens and Timoney, committee members, guests, and constituents. Again, my name is Raymond Sexton. I'm the director of the Lexington Human Rights Commission. As I mentioned, we are the civil rights agency in Lexington that investigates complaints of discrimination. One of our statutory duties of the commission is to cooperate with individuals, federal, state, and other local agencies in efforts to develop harmonious intergroup and interracial relations. I cannot think of a better topic or cause to invoke this statutory mission that we will certainly develop more harmonious interracial racial relations than the language of our state's Constitution. We are here today to draw attention to Section 25 of the Kentucky Constitution that to this day still allows for slavery and involuntary servitude as a punishment for a crime. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1865, abolished slavery and involuntary servitude in the United States except as punishment for someone convicted of a crime. The exception clause loophole led to repressive 19th century laws in the South known as black codes that allowed authorities to incarcerate black people for petty crimes such as vagrancy and then force them to work. Black codes were a precursor to the Jim Crow laws outlawed by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This exception clause is still on the books not only in our U.S. Constitution but still persists in more than a dozen state constitutions. The antiquated language continues to perpetuate the systemic and systematic racism that plagues our society and continues to tell our marginalized communities that their lives do not matter. It shows that although that chattel slavery may be abolished, slavery is now transformed into something totally different that still has distressing ramifications for the African American community. Our office began working on this project in November of 2022 with these amazing youth from South Elkhorn Christian Church when they contacted our office about this issue and wanted to see how, number one, their voice can matter, how they can invoke change, and learn a little bit about the government works, or how the government works in the process. We began by creating a resolution supporting the removal of the exception clause that was unanimously adopted by our Board of Commissioners in January of 2023. We have continued to work on this issue from a local perspective throughout 2023 by engaging with the Lexington Urban County Council to pass a similar resolution and garnering support from other agencies such as our partners with the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. These youth have showed great poise and passion through presentations to not only the Lexington Human Rights Commission board members, but the mayor and council members of Lexington, Kentucky. We have some of these outstanding youth here today that will address this topic, this committee, and this important topic. I hope this committee will continue to push this topic forward. Ladies and gentlemen, words matter. We've been told this since we were young. Let's show the citizens of this great Commonwealth that words do matter and abolish this exception clause. We appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you. And if you don't mind, I have a brief statement. The senior minister, Michael Schwartzentruber, he could not be with us today. He really wanted to attend, but he provided a quick statement. I serve South Elkhorn Christian Church as senior minister, along with my colleagues in ministry, Reverend Holly Fuquay, church moderator Peter Breckney, and outreach leader Barb Ellerbrook. We are here to support the amazing youth of our church who have recognized the injustice of Article 25 of the Kentucky Constitution with its exception clause for slavery, and they are doing something about it, advocating to make a long overdue change that has escaped our collective attention and remains more than a symbolic vestige of the past, but an insidious invitation to the future, a future we can do something about. These young people are intelligent, compassionate, and driven to put their faith in God of limitless love into action, to make a difference toward healing the historic brokenness of our community, and witness to a more inclusive, mutually flourishing vision of our shared life. They are catalysts in a needed movement to bring people together and to do something for the well-being of all Lexingtonians and all Kentuckians. I am proud of them and I believe in them, and I hope you'll listen, learn, and do your part to follow their leadership. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And Ms. Fox.
Good afternoon again. My name is Cynthia Fox. I'm with the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, as I said before. And in being in that capacity, this is of great concern to us. But also, prior to me going to the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, I served as a parole officer in Jefferson County, and I also served at Kentucky State Reformatory as a classification and treatment officer. So the fact that this was here 30 years ago when I first came back to Kentucky and is still here today is of great concern. I want to apologize to you in advance. I think we have some of the same research, so I may be repetitive, so I want to let you know that ahead of time. I'll apologize for that. Slavery was a part of Kentucky even before statehood was granted in 1792. The state's earliest settlers brought their human property with them to help tame the wilderness of Kentucky. Upon becoming the 15th state in the Union, Kentucky formally legalized slavery by including the institution of slavery in the state's constitution. Article 9 explained that slavery could only be abolished by the consent of the owner or by compensated emancipation. Slavery was outlawed in the United States upon passage of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution in 1865. On February 24, 1865, the Kentucky General Assembly rejected the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which provided for the abolition of slavery in the United States. On March 1, 1865, Governor Thomas E. Bramlett, the 23rd governor of Kentucky, sent a letter to the Kentucky House saying he disagreed with the rejection and arguing that slavery is irrevocably doomed to speedy extermination. The amendment was ratified by 3/4 of the states in the United States and went into effect on December 6, 1865. Kentucky was not one of these states. In an effort to prolong the one-sided benefits of slavery, many southern states, including Kentucky, adopted punishment clauses, retaining the option of slavery in circumstances in which a person had been duly convicted. Punishment clauses in the 13th Amendment permits involuntary servitude so long as it is imposed pursuant to a criminal punishment. The punishment clauses were used to create a system of prison labor and came along around the same time as the passage of the Black Codes. But the sentencing and the punishment was by no means always equal or just. Black codes, sometimes called black laws, criminalized behaviors often attributed to Black Americans. Black laws were designed to govern the conduct of Black Americans. Immediately after the Civil War ended, Southern states enacted black codes that allowed Black Americans certain rights, such as legalized marriage, ownership of property, and limited access to the courts, but denied them the rights to testify against whites, to serve on juries or in states' militias, to vote, or to start a job without approval of the previous employer. These codes were all repealed in 1866 when Reconstruction began. One of the focuses of the Reconstruction era was to guarantee rights of former slaves and define new relationships between Black and white Americans. But even after Reconstruction in 1877 and the removal of Black men from political offices, many Southern states again enacted a series of laws intended to define and restrict the lives of Black Americans. Some of the examples of the harsh laws penalized anyone for attempting to leave a job before an advance had been worked off in their previous job or current job. Vagrancy statutes made it a crime to be unemployed. Many misdemeanors or trivial offenses such as the use of bad language were treated as felonies with harsh sentences and fines. These codes facilitated keeping prisons and jails full of quote unquote workers. And Kentucky refused to ratify the 13th Amendment until March 18, 1976. So today, 157 years and 11 months after slavery was outlawed in the United States, and 47 years and 7 months and 19 days, excluding today, from the date that it was ratified in Kentucky, the Kentucky Constitution still endorses slavery for one group, inmates. And to this day, we still look and see that slavery and involuntary servitude in this state are forbidden except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall be duly convicted. Now, slavery in the dictionary is defined as practice or institution of holding people as chattel, involuntarily and under threat of violence. I take that to mean that these individuals, these people who have convicted of crimes could be treated as animals, as property. The Kentucky Division of Adult Institution oversees 14 correctional facilities that house Kentucky adult and inmate populations. The Kentucky Center for Economic Policy website indicated that in 2022, Kentucky's correctional population was 95,479. 32,351 people were in the local jails and state prisons, and another 63,128 were on supervision, for example, in probation or parole. The Commonwealth of Kentucky puts many inmates to work within these prisons and state communities. It has been reported that much of prison labor in this day and time is dedicated to prison and facility maintenance. It has also been reported that the work conducted by inmates in more recent times allows for vocational training and experience. In fact, the mission statement of the Division of Adult Institutions is to provide opportunities for offenders to acquire skills which facilitate non-criminal behavior. Training and experience is definitely one thing, and slavery is another. And by law, these individuals convicted of crimes could be enslaved, not just trained, but actually enslaved. There is no place for any provision of slavery in our state constitution, although limited to punishment for a crime, whether implied or actual. All forms of slavery are cruel, immoral, and unacceptable, regardless of any circumstances, including as punishment for crime. It is my opinion that Kentuckians should follow the lead of Alabama, Tennessee, Vermont, and Oregon to remove similar language from our state constitution. Our commission previously adopted resolutions for this removal. One on August 20th, 2015, and again in February 16th, 2023. And we're still here. The Kentucky Commission on Human Rights will continue to stand with all those who advocate for and protect the civil rights and human rights of those in the Commonwealth and with all who promote and encourage goodwill. We would like to see this amendment to the section of the state constitution that allows for slavery as criminal punishment be removed. This removal would be another positive step toward expunging all remnants and reminders of the cruel and immoral institution of slavery and inequality in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. That was outstanding. Any members of the commission have any questions for our presenters? Senator Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you all for bringing this information and requests to the table. I think it's very important. I think I have to ask, I noticed in the packet we have, there is a draft copy. Is this the same one that I asked to be included of legislation, proposed legislation?
This may be the same, but I'm not 100% sure of what your request was.
Well, let me put it this. You all didn't request for this to be in there, did you? Okay. Then I think unless someone else requested from the commission, this is probably it. And the reason why that was requested is that I have filed this legislation on a few occasions prior to now. But I picked up something during this testimony that I think was very interesting, because the piece that I submitted simply struck out proposed to strike out the except as a punishment for crime where the party shall have been duly convicted. So doing that, of course, would eliminate the whole question. But then the question did come up in query by Chair Timoney as it related, and I believe Dr. Childs, during your testimony, that it had implications as it related to work that someone who's incarcerated
Yes.
does or may do, and you raised the point of what I would sum up in my own words as an abuse of the system by those who take advantage of this, the enabling of those who are the exception made for involuntary servitude as it relates to work. We'll put it in this particular regard. But you said something, and correct me, I just want to make sure that I'm correct about this. Did you say that there is a fix for that even? Would you articulate that one more time? I wasn't clear on that.
A fix for restate your question.
Well, the fact of the matter is that those who are incarcerated already do work for entities, and in your opinion and mine as well, those individuals get cheap labor, and it's sort of a form of servitude,
Yes.
consistent with perhaps what's allowed in our Constitution as it stands.
Right.
So I thought you put a fix on that. That could be addressed in the language some sort of way, and I was interested, and I may have misinterpreted what you said, but
No, I simply stated that I would not propose a fix. I simply stated that the nature of prisons is called reform. We use the language of reform. And so if, and rehabilitation. And so if the best kinds of situations are where inmates can take university classes, or they can take vocational kind of classes where they can come out with a skill set. I was simply commenting on that.
okay. Well, I probably thank you very much for that response, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So I may have taken in my mind, made a leap here, but anyway, I just wanted to thank you for bringing this forward, and certainly it's my intention to pursue this during the upcoming legislative session as well.
Thank you so much. I think we're on the same page.
Any other members have any questions? Yes, sir.
I too would like to thank Dr. Childs, Mrs. Fox, and Mr. Sexton for your testimony, and for I thank all the young people that are in the audience that are concerned about this particular issue. There are a couple of things I just want to bring to the fore as I understand them. There were some errors, E-R-A-S, in our history that I think we need to remind ourselves of and study. And one is the Civil War. 2 is Reconstruction. 3 is the Jim Crow era, which is where the Klan rose up and started to brutally enforce the laws that were on the books, or the feeling of inferiority of people of African descent. And then the Civil Rights era. And there's the era that we probably in now that says that we're somehow beyond all the eras, the Jim Crow, the Civil Rights era, the Reconstruction, and the Civil War, and all the things that led to involuntary servitude. The book that, or the references that you make, are these books banned in Kentucky?
Most likely, but once people find out, maybe I'm helping them be banned by publicizing it. So,
well, thank you very much for bringing those to our attention. I think it's great information, and with the young people I see in the audience, hopefully they are fertile ground for getting this information and understanding and direction that we need to take our country. Yes, sir.
Can I just add something facetious? One of them was my book, and I hope that it is banned so that I can get more publicity on it.
Okay. Mr. Sexton, I know you from Lexington and the Human Rights Commission and the work that you do. Ms. Fox, thank you so much for your presentation, and I think that being in the record, Mr. Chair, I think it's important for us to move forward. I think it's a blight on our state that we don't take the necessary action. And Senator Neal, with the draft amendment that probably is going to come forward in the next session, that would be a great thing to start the discussion and move the General Assembly to correcting a wrong that has been in place in Kentucky for an awful long time. We just had a meeting a little while ago that I was in, and we were talking about recidivism and talking about making people useful, contributing members of society. But it's like the system is set up for there not to be contributing members of society who have committed a crime. And I would simply say this to people who think that we're doing the right thing, is something I heard from the Bible. But for the grace of God, there go I. And we are all, especially African American people, we're all just one incident away from being entangled in this system. So thank you very much for bringing this forward, and I intend to work with Senator Neal to get legislation from the House side. He's on the Senate side, but the both sides of us to put this forward, and hopefully we can get support. Mr. Timothy, you're in the House. I can work with you, and we can hopefully draft some legislation that will address these ills that are happening in our country. And I'd like to say to the young people in the audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for looking at how this works, because you all are going to be the catalyst for changing Kentucky, America, and the world. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Co-Chair Givens.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and a good conversation. Good doctor, if you could you start your slideshow over and bring it back up? That language that we're talking about is that second slide, and it really helps to have that in front of us for purposes of this conversation.
Of course.
And what I'd like to do, if my colleagues will indulge me for a moment, if you have a copy of the draft language, the working draft that's in our packet, thank you very much. That's exactly what I need. Slavery and involuntary servitude in this state are forbidden except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Your presentation was insightful to me. I was not familiar with convict leasing, and so that's a new phrase to me. Naive as I am, that's a new phrase, and I appreciate you helping me to understand the nuances of why the words were written the way they were written. So, knowing the challenge of getting a constitutional amendment passed, knowing that challenge, because we have an electorate that will sometimes not take time to fully understand the meaning, I want to propose, and typically we do this in a small conversation, but this is the perfect place to take a few moments and have the discussion. Staff brought to me some interesting language that's already in the Constitution in Section 253, and I want to start laying the groundwork by alerting everyone. Jot down Section 253 and take a look at it when you get a chance. Section 253 speaks to the working of penitentiary prisoners when and where permitted. Our state constitution reads, and I'm going to read it rather quickly because it's a little long, but follow me on this. Section 253 says, persons convicted of felony and sentenced to confinement in the penitentiary shall be confined at labor within the walls of the penitentiary, and the General Assembly shall not have the power to authorize employment of convicts elsewhere except upon the public works of the Commonwealth, or when during pestilence or in case of destruction of the prison buildings, they cannot be confined in the penitentiary. That Section 253 of the Constitution be amended so that the Commonwealth of Kentucky may use and employ outside the walls of the penitentiaries in such manner and means as may be provided by law, persons convicted of felony and sentenced to confinement in the penitentiary for the purpose of constructing or reconstructing and maintaining public roads, public bridges, or for the purpose of making and preparing material for public roads and bridges, and that the Commonwealth may, by the use of employment of convict labor outside of the walls of the penitentiary, by other ways or means as may be provided by law, aid counties for road and bridge purposes, work on state farm or farms. Now, I share that with you to say we've done some constraining in that language, I think, that gets largely to the Victoria's Secret example that you've raised. I share that to say if we don't make our proposed constitutional amendment change simple, we end up bogging down the electorate in ways I don't think we intend to. So my proposal would be as simple as this. With that working draft in hand, follow my markup here. And again, I'm not saying this is the way to do it. I'm just saying this might be a place to start. An act proposing to replace Section 25 of the Constitution relating to slavery. Section 1, are you in favor of amending Section 25 of the Constitution to prohibit slavery in all circumstances? Keep it simple. Don't get into muddying the water with involuntary servitude and confusing an electorate about whether or not prisoners can be made to work. Again, because we have a Section 253 part. Go on to say, repeal and replace Section 25 of the Constitution of Kentucky to read as follows: slavery in this state is forbidden, period. Think about it. We can talk more later, but the simpler we do this, the better. The easier and cleaner we do this, the less words on the ballot, because everything above Section 3 has to appear on the ballot. So, colleagues, as you work on language, keep it tight and simple. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Chair. Masterclass as usual on passing amendments. No, definitely.
Having failed before, failure's a good teacher.
Yes, sir. Senator Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I disagree with the statement was made, but I do want your insight into this piece because I may have missed a point. What I'm proposing and what I have proposed historically is to simply say slavery and involuntary servitude in this state are forbidden. That's what my proposal is. What is the distinction that you're making?
The distinction I'm making is to my layman's eyes, the first time I read and considered this 6 months ago, as the co-chair and I were having the conversation, I thought to myself, if we prohibit or forbid involuntary servitude, are we forbidding people to work in prisons?
No.
Can you understand why a layman's eyes might see that?
Yes.
Okay. So my point is, the simpler you make it for the electorate who may see involuntary servitude as folks that rightly pick up, by their choice, choose to help pick up the garbage on the side of the road while they're imprisoned, the layman's eyes might see that to say, we're forbidding that? That was where I was coming from.
So I don't see any contradiction in forbidding slavery, involuntary servitude, and then defining what those parameters are as it attempts to do on the legislation or the part of the Constitution that you've already alluded to on 252. Is that 253?
253.
253. So I think it's a matter of being thoughtful and understanding what that language should be, but I don't see them as militating against each other necessarily. I do think the craft, the language craft, is going to be very important in how that gets translated into reality and how people might use it or not. I think that point is well taken.
What appears on the ballot matters the most.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent discussion, as usual. Thank you all. And we're going to bring the students forward. We want to put them on the hot seat and get some of their perspective. The cool seat, I should say. A cool seat. This is a safe environment. thank you all for being here. I'd like to remind you to use your microphone. Go ahead and push the talk button and the green light should come on. If you all wouldn't mind going across the front and introducing yourselves.
My name is Cora Bridigan.
My name is Brewer Conley.
I'm Kennedy Fuquay.
Well, thank you all for being here. I know it was probably a big ask for some of you to be out of school today. Real stretch. I see a lot of tears. If you wouldn't mind kind of giving us some perspective of, where your interest in this came along and why you're so passionately behind it.
Wait, you start with me? Okay. This is important to us because our youth group got to witness during our Alabama mission trip about some of the injustice that still exists today. And I think it was then that we were aware of this clause and we started talking about it maybe a year ago. And yeah, we've just been slowly working towards this.
I think that this is something that we are so interested in because of the things that we have witnessed in our experiences. And I think that learning more about it and just knowing more things has caused more passion for us.
Yes, and like Cora and Brewer said, we've experienced this. We went to the Legacy Museum in Alabama back in 2022, and we've just all been taught to love people no matter their race or gender or sexuality. And slavery is obviously an awful thing that was created out of hate, and it shouldn't have been a thing, and it certainly still shouldn't be a thing. So we have decided that we want to help change it. So.
Excellent. So what types of work sessions have you all had as far as working on this idea?
Whenever we first learned about this, we met with our senior minister at our church, and he basically explained everything to us. And then after that, we had a meeting with Ray about what we want to do to change it, what's going to be the process. After that, we met with Ray a few times, and then we went to the city council meeting in May of 2023, and we spoke, the three of us spoke, and then I believe that we have been in contact with some of the city council members who have helped us to then proceed to get to this level.
That's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. Okay. So how much outside of your youth group time have you spent thinking about this particular issue?
I actually, last year, in my last school year, I was taking world history, was one of my classes. And so I actually met with my teacher and talked to my teacher about writing my script and about what has happened and just like learning more about it with her.
I did the same thing. As a junior and senior in high school, we were learning about most of the history of all of this in world history and U.S. history. And I was also talking to my teachers about this and what would happen if we changed it, why it hasn't been changed, all the history behind it. So.
For me, I talked to my sister a little bit about it, and I also talked to my history teacher last year when we were going into our racism unit. And yeah, I had a conversation with her about it, and it was pretty helpful.
Excellent. I know that this is a pretty passionate topic, and I know you probably were unaware of what this really was like until you had that learning experience, and that's what it's about. But ultimately, 10,000 feet up, looking down, seeing young people civically engaged. I'm a former government teacher, so it makes my heart happy. And you all did an excellent job today presenting. Continue with your work. Any work that truly draws on your passion never feels like work. And that's one of the piece of advice that I would give to you as you move forward up into adulthood. Find things that you're passionate about because it never seems like work. Do we have any members that have any questions? Representative Brown?
Thank you. Thank you all so very much for what you wrote and your testimony here today. I want you to do one thing. Do it slowly for me if you would, because I'm a little old. So if you would give me your name starting from the left, from my right, your left, and coming back, your names and who you are so I can identify your statements with you.
Cora Britigan.
Cora, okay, you're number one.
I am Brewer Conley.
Okay, you're two.
Kennedy Fuqua.
Okay, Fuqua. Thank you so much. I certainly appreciate what you all have written and said. And we have to understand that, I hope you all understand the impact that you all are having and will have going forward, because we need all of the soldiers, if you will, on the battlefield to make America all that it should be. And so much of what has happened in America historically, we have not been, as a country, all that we could and should be. And thank you for understanding that and speaking to what needs to happen in America to make America right. Because you can't be free. Your family cannot be free. Your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren cannot be free as long as there's a lack of freedom for some people. So thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing. As a young voter, one of you all said in your message that as a young voter, you will take all these things into consideration. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Neal.
I just want to thank you for coming and displaying your intelligence. And I have to say that you reaffirm my confidence in the younger generation that's coming up. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Representative Haverin.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to comment as well. What a full circle moment. I ran for office so young women would know they have a place at government and to be able to make decisions. And so it's very humbling to see three young ladies sit at the table to talk about hard things. Please keep up your confidence and courage to be able to talk about hard things. As soon as you all started speaking, I leaned over Senator Neal and said, this gives me great faith in the future that we have in Kentucky to see young people involved and not on easy issues. This is something that's very important, and so continue your hard work. It is very easy to get discouraged in hard conversations like this, but don't. Stay true to what you believe, and there will always be a path forward for you all. So thank you for having the confidence today to come talk to us, but continue your hard work too and your love for others.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, one more point.
Excuse me, Chair. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. These young ladies were really know what the process was going to be, so they were expecting more of a read their statement versus questions. So they do have prepared statements. If you
Would love to hear them.
Entertain.
Would love to hear them.
Okay, thank you, because they worked really hard on it. So.
Hello, again, my name is Brewer Conley, and I'm here as one of the South Elkhorn Christian Church youth representatives. Back in 2022, some of the high school youth at my church went to Birmingham, Alabama for an anti-racism mission trip. While we were there, we went to multiple African American and equal rights monuments, as well as the Legacy Museum and the Lynching Museum. A few months after we got back, it was brought to our attention that there is still a slavery exception clause in the Kentucky Constitution. After everything that we saw in Birmingham, this broke our hearts. We decided to put our resources together and take action. Although this exception clause is not being used, getting rid of it would send a huge message. The youth at my church have a goal to get equal rights for everyone and be role models for future generations. So today we are here in Frankfort working towards our goals and making an impact on today's society. Thank you all.
Hello, again, my name is Kennedy Fuqua, and I am a freshman at the University of Kentucky. As you know, slavery is still legal in the state of Kentucky. Section 25 of the Kentucky Constitution states, "Slavery and involuntary servitude in this state are forbidden except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted." This is baffling, I know, but let me further explain. The last time this section was revised was in September 28, 1891, after being ratified on August 3, 1891. It has been 132 years since this has been edited. And while that might sound crazy, I found it even crazier that since slavery in America was abolished in 1865, Kentucky ratified this section 26 years later. Let that sink in a little bit. 26 years after the United States abolished slavery, Kentucky added this clause. I have a few questions about this. First of all, why would slavery be permitted in Kentucky long after being abolished, and why is it still legal today? Though I'm sure others have tried in the past, and right now, why is it taking a group of kids in 2023 to start making a change? Maybe some of you didn't know this was still in the Kentucky State Constitution, and I get that. I didn't know this until last year. That being said, it is still important to amend this section even though it's often overlooked. It's all about the what-ifs. Though many might say no one would use this section for the worst, what if they did? What if nothing ever changes? That sounds like a world I would never want to live in, but that's the thing. We're living in that world right now. It's been 132 years. Years and there has been no change. So let's go back to the what-ifs. What if this section was amended and the world started to become a better place? What if others hear about what this group of teenagers are doing in Kentucky and decide to make a positive change in their communities too? That sounds better. But now I ask you, why? Why would anyone think that this clause is still valuable in our Constitution? We believe this needs to be changed, but we cannot do it alone. So we ask, will you sit back and let this detrimental phrase create potential problems, or help us fix what's right? Or help us do what's right and fix it? We need your help and your support. Thank you for your time.
Hello, again, my name is Cora Britigan. I'm from Paul Lawrence Dunbar. I'm a sophomore, and I'm here on behalf of the South Elkhorn Christian Church Youth Group. Our youth group has frequently discussed how we believe that involuntary servitude and slavery should be abolished from our state constitution. Before our youth group started talking about this clause, I was completely unaware that it existed. I discovered that it permits slavery as a punishment for a crime, and it links back to the United States' history of convict leasing. After the Civil War, harsh and discriminatory laws targeted African Americans, sending them to prisons. The prisons would then lease these convicts to private railways, mines, and plantations, where the convicts would face brutal conditions and earn no pay while states profited. This isn't something that should have ever been in our Constitution, and it certainly shouldn't be here today. Not only is it heartbreaking knowing that something like this still exists, but it also reflects poorly on the state of Kentucky as a whole. The act of Kentucky removing this clause could draw attention and inspire the other states with this clause to remove it as well. There isn't a single good reason why this clause should still exist in today's world. As President Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, the Constitution was not intended to be static, but to be adaptable to changing needs. It is not acceptable to not work to remove this clause because it is too difficult or too long of a process. My youth group and I are committed to doing whatever it takes, and we urge you to do the same. We strongly believe that removing this clause is a step forward to unity and togetherness. Thank you for your time.
Thank you all for your excellent testimony today. You are free to, unless you have any other parting comments for us.
Thank you.
Well, this topic is the last topic on our agenda for today. But before we do move for adjournment, we do have a couple comments from members prior to adjourning. Senator Neal.
Thank you, Chair Timoney. Time sort of ran out, but there was some a couple of issues I wanted to bring up before the commission. It's my hope that the commission continues. It's my understanding that's the aspiration anyway, so that we may be able to revisit other issues going forward. I found the testimony from various individuals from time to time was very educational and enlightening, and I think that's important. But I do think that the commission needs to position itself to make recommendations for action by the Kentucky General Assembly. And what was presented here today I consider to be low-hanging fruit in terms of actions that we can immediately address and take some action on. So I'm trusting that there will be a robust discussion in the House and Senate, and that I would join with my colleague, Senator Givens, in looking at this more closely and working toward that which is correct and proper in this instance. I do want to say that at the end of the day, we as policymakers, our job is to make policy. Some people call it laws. But we make policy, and there's implications behind everything we do and what we don't do. And sometimes, Mr. Chairman, we do things thinking the best in terms of what we attempt to do, but it results often in unintended consequences. And you know how it is. Once we put something in law, it might last for the years that these individuals here these young ladies have expressed here. It's been here this long. I'm trying to figure out why it is, and when it's obvious that there is at least a conflict, perhaps we can historically document a moral conflict in the unintended outcomes of this particular subject matter that's here today. So my point is that I have drafted legislation that deals with policy, and it deals with it in the area of criminal justice area and in the area of health. And that is a mechanism, I'll use the word mechanism in quote, for us to re-examine legislation that comes to the floor of the Senate and the House, so that those who are in a position can take a deeper dive than we might have done to at least assess whether or not there's a potential for unintended consequences in certain legislation that's flagged going forward. I won't get into all the details now, but I think from a policy position, this is something we ought to consider. I've offered this legislation in the past. I was hopeful that we could get it before the commission, but I don't fault the commission at that. I'll just say there's just so much to deal with that's going to take time. But I did want to put that on the floor. I want to put that on the record today. Is my intent to informally, unless a formal mechanism presents itself, to explore these two avenues in the criminal justice area and in the health area. I'm going to invite the commissions on human rights to join in and others to have a robust discussion across the Commonwealth, and we will document this information, provide it to all members of this commission and to the legislature itself to deal with this subject matter. So thank you again, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your leadership. I want to thank your co-chair for his leadership and concern in initiating, quite frankly, this process. I had significant question marks in my mind at the beginning of this, and although I still have question marks in my mind, I'm always willing to talk, discuss, exchange information, aspire for the best, and work toward that. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Co-Chair Givens.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And a few brief remarks as we draw to the close of another interim and the work of the commission continues forward. And Senator Neal, I want to speak to your question that you raised. I do see the commission continuing forward in new and innovative and robust ways. We've been 3 years at this work, and it's been a very productive, in my mind, 3 years. We had no model to follow. We had no example of what the commission should or should not be doing. I think we've created a wonderful forum for the sort of presentations that we saw today and so many others that we've seen. And I was thinking back on some of those with the help of our able staff. I don't think there's another forum in state government that exists where we could have had Dr. Edward Miller from U of L Health come and talk about access to medical care in the black community. I don't think there's another place that exists in the work we do in the legislative body where Dr. Dana Quisenberry from the University of Kentucky could have come and talked about the significantly accelerated rate of increase in opioid overdose deaths that are so much higher in the black community. I don't think there's a single place in the work we do in policymaking where the Kentucky Chamber could have appeared multiple times and talked about recruiting a diverse workforce and the benefits of a diverse workforce and how we promote and grow minority-owned businesses. I don't think there's a place in the policy-making sphere in Kentucky where one Lexington could have appeared and talked about youth and young adult opportunities to get workplace experience, along with a very insightful discussion that one Lexington led about how to facilitate cooperation between urban county government, Fayette County Public Schools, the criminal justice system, law enforcement, faith-based and nonprofit sectors across Lexington to help elevate minority students and minority young people. And then you go to the other end of the spectrum and we have someone like Tracy Pulley from the Fulton County Independent Schools Friskies program. If you remember that presentation, she's passionate about the work she does with really challenging young people in challenging circumstances, helping connect them with resources and helping connect them with mentors and models to move their lives forward. So I am truly and genuinely proud of the 3 years of work we've done here on the commission. When I filed the legislation a little over 3 years ago and we set this in motion, I knew in my mind I was going to commit to 3 years, and I'm proud of the 3 years of work that I've done. I am going to be stepping down as co-chair. I will not be a member of the commission, and it's not for any reason other than I'm always going to be a cheerleader and a champion of the work that happens here. The best way to get more cheerleaders and more champions is to have new members. I learned long ago, Representative Heverin, that I was a better studier of the Bible when I had to lead the Sunday school lesson because I really wanted to make sure I got it right. We need more cheerleaders and champions for the work the commission does. I will go on record and share some disappointments as well. The apathy of attendance that we see on a regular basis truly disappoints me. And so as we have, I think staff was informing me that the citizen members are all up for reappointment. I'd love to hold accountable the appointing entities for these citizen members. If we don't see regular attendance, we can't be a productive working group. And that lack of attendance has disappointed me. That's been disappointing. But I am so excited about what the future holds for difficult conversations. There is no place in state government where we purposely run headlong into difficult and challenging conversations. Sit in any other committee in Frankfort and hear the word race come up and hear the word disproportionate impacts, hear the words that are raised in here regularly. In any other place in the work we do, and you're going to see people putting their guards up instantly because that's our human nature. That's no observation of good or evil or pain or, well, it's an observation of pain. But we cultivate that here. We run headlong into those sort of conversations, and I'm proud of the 3 years of work we've put into doing that. I'm excited about what the future holds, and I do expect this commission to roll on for years to come. And I want to say what a joy it has been to serve with my former co-chair and to serve with my current co-chair in this work. And I wish this entity and the staff such talent and passion. And I wish this entity and organization all the best, and I will be cheering loudly. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Chair Givens. Outstanding comments. And I think that we have to hold each other accountable. I think that in my short time being in Frankfort and being a part of this commission, that there's healthy doses of skepticism about the work that we do. But much as they say in politics that, talk is cheap, I do talk a lot, but I also I care a lot. And that's where I meet with this committee. So it has been a pleasure of mine serving with you and with our staff. We have to get people here to contribute because I've had plenty of conversations with myself throughout my life, prom night, those types of things. Anyway, that's digressing. But thank you all for being here today. Thank you, committee. Thank you, staff. You all do an outstanding job. And with that, we adjourn.